Hi everyone, it's Brenda from Stamplicity here with your weekly video tutorial. We're going to continue exploring distress inks, and I got 3 techniques to show you today. So I have some samples here that I'm going to be showing you the technique. Looking at the background here, this is one of the techniques we are going to do called ghosting. Alright, so a great background technique. I'm also going to show you reverse stenciling. Last week I showed you how to use distress inks through a stencil. This week I'm going to show you a technique called reverse stenciling to achieve this background look with the stars. And then the third technique I'm going to show you is how to achieve this watercolor look on watercolor paper as a background. I get lots of questions concerning this in the store with some of the samples I have here. So I'm going to show you how quickly and easy that is done. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is show you the ghosting technique, okay? So I'm going to work on a tag on this one, and I'm going to be using these 2 color of distress inks, the Abandoned Coral and Carved Pumpkin, nice bright colors. And I'm going to go ahead and just apply these colors onto my tag. And I showed you how to do this, how quickly you can do this last week I showed you on the video. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and add those colors onto this background. So I want to completely saturate my tag with color. Nice bright colors, love them. Just going to go back to the Abandoned Coral. Okay, so now my tag is saturated with color. Pretty. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually lay a stencil over top of this. And I'm going to mist water through this. So I showed you last week in the video, when you add water to the distress inks, it does some funky stuff, and it actually can create water spots when you put water on there. This time we're going to put it through a stencil. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a few sprays. Alright, and now I'm going to remove my stencil. And I'm not sure, the camera can pick it up that I do. You can see the water droplets on there. I'm going to let that sit for a few minutes. You can see that pattern of that stencil actually coming through. Leave that on there for a few seconds, and then I'm just going to take a paper towel, roll. This one is a clean one as opposed to the one I showed you in the video last week. Alright, and what that has done now, that water that I've sprayed through the stencil has removed some of that ink. So we get this ghosting effect through of that stencil pattern. So that is how that is done with distress inks. So the longer you add the water, the lighter that ghosting will be. That pattern will show more. So you can see in this my sample, some of the dots are almost white. Okay, so we've sprayed it, we've left it on, and then we've allowed it to dry. Okay, now as this dries, my tag that I've done, it will dry a little bit lighter, so that ghosting will be a little bit more apparent. But you can see, makes a great background, creates texture in your background. Alright, so that's the ghosting technique. The second technique I'm going to show you is the reverse stenciling. So like I said, last week I showed you how to stencil, use distress inks through a stencil onto your background. This time we're actually going to start with a stencil, and we're going to apply the inks directly onto the stencil. So I'm using, this is a leaf stencil from Diane Reevely from Ranger, and I'm just applying some of the distress inks directly onto the stencil. So that is Twisted Citron, and I'm going to put some Mowed Lawn, and we'll put some Fossilized Amber in there, and some Forest Moss. I'm not too concerned about how messy it looks on the stencil right now. I'm going to go ahead and spritz this with water now. And those inks will start kind of blending together. So that's why I wasn't too concerned about the hard lines that was there from the ink pads. Okay, so you can either do this in a regular watercolor paper or cardstock. You'll get different looks. This is just plain white cardstock I'm going to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and layer that on. And again, I'm going to take my paper towel roll and just roll on it. I like to use the pressure of the paper towel roll rather than my hands because I get a more even pressure. So I'm just going to go ahead and roll that back and forth. And if we lift that up, we'll get this cool watermarked image, all right? Great for our background, so you can see. So as that dries, we'll still get the imagery from the stencil that remains white, but the background will be that watercolory look. So that is reverse stenciling with distress inks. All right, third technique. Just gonna clean up this. And the third technique is creating a watercolory background using distress ink. So I have a large 6x6 acrylic block here. Now this is what I like to use. You can also just use your craft sheet, but I tend to just use my acrylic block for this technique. It's just personal preference, that's all. So what you're going to do then is you are going to take whatever distress ink color that you want your background to be. I tend to use the lighter colors for this. So this is Broken China. So I'm directly applying that onto the acrylic block. And then I'm going to spritz this until you have some nice water droplets formed there, okay? Now the more water you put on there, the more watery the background is going to be. So I'm using watercolor paper for this. This is the Ranger watercolor paper. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this and dip this into my distress ink mess that was on the acrylic block. And you're going to pull that up and you're going to see that you get more of a watercolory background. So I would go ahead and dry this and then you can go and re-dip because there's still a lot of inky goodness on there. So I'm not going to dry, I'm going to skip that step, but I'm just going to continue dipping until I'm kind of happy with the look I have. Alright, so you can go ahead and dry this and then go ahead and stamp on top of this. If you find it's too dark, what you can do is spritz it with water, and that's going to reactivate those inks, and then go ahead and then just blot it with a paper towel, and that's going to remove some of it. So if you got your background just a little too dark, you can go ahead and just add water. That's the cool thing about it. So now I've just got this nice cloud blue background, and you can also go back. I still have ink on here. If I wanted just some of those spots to be showing on my background, I just go ahead and dip, and those are going to create darker spots on there. Alright, so those are 3 different distress ink backgrounds techniques. So first of all was the ghosting technique. Alright, so that is spraying water through a stencil. The second one was the reverse stenciling. Alright, and that's applying your inks directly to the back of a stencil, spritzing it with water, and then applying your paper. And then the third technique was creating a watercolor background, and that was just applying ink either onto acrylic block or your craft sheet, spritzing it with water, and then dipping watercolor paper into it to create that look. Alright, 3 techniques down, and we'll have a few more for next week. Alright, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.